Happy Tuesday, everybody. And we are joined today with Mary Keane-Dawson, who is calling in from London and is CEO of Takumi. Mary, I know you're in the UK, but happy Cinco de Mayo.
Happy Cinco de Mayo to you too.
I know you are also working on many campaigns, including Cinco de Mayo. You worked,
Yes.
Takumi has done over 2,500 campaigns. And what we were talking about was that for some of us, this is a busier time than ever, and especially for you in the influencer marketing space. Can you tell me how busy it's been?
Well, I think, first off, initially, it was a bit of a shock to everybody what was happening in globally. So I think there was like a couple of weeks there where we were very like, wow, where's everybody gone? But certainly in the last 4 weeks, we have seen a big, growth and return to focus in the influencer space. But there has been a change. And I think COVID-19 is very much part of that change. It's meant that there's been a new kind of focus, a new kind of messaging. And I think we're going to be talking about that today, about the changes that are taking place in society that are clearly being reflected by influencer. I think the other thing to say is that a lot of the very big brands that, the global brands are pivoting a lot of their creative and their focus to reflect what's happening, particularly in the hygiene space and the messaging about keeping safe and looking after yourself and your family in this very unpredictable time where there's a huge amount of ambiguity for people, I think has been quite compelling. And it's kind of born a new type of creative approach, which influencers and creators are exceptionally good at delivering.
Yeah, let's talk about those changes. The obvious change is that influencers and creators are at home and creating from home. But there's also a certain nuance to that messaging and an amplification of authenticity in that messaging. Is that right?
Yeah, I think particularly for what we call macro influencers and creators. I mean, those are really creators who are, essentially they have a talent or a mission that resonates very clearly with an audience. They find their audience, but they don't tend to be the sort of superstar mogul type creators or influencers who also have like TV contracts and makeup lines and so on and so forth. They tend to be much more in the kind of passion space, I would describe it, where they've got quite strong views and they share those with their audience. I mean, the one thing I think it is important to stress about authenticity is that as a person who would follow an influencer or like a blogger or follow somebody on Pinterest or wherever it might be, it's a choice that I'm making. So I'm making an investment in that influencer, right? because I like what they're talking about, I like what they're saying, I find them entertaining, whatever. So that choice means I've got some kind of investment in the influencer, and that influencer knows that if they want to nurture their audience and keep their audience, then they've kind of got to keep resonating with them and bringing them new, interesting stuff. So that's a different kind of trade, perhaps, than when you're talking about, being a megastar influencer, which is a different kind of experience, I think, and a different type of engagement that you would get with your audience. So that's where the trust and authenticity really comes into play. Because if I'm a macro influencer, maybe I have 1 million followers, or maybe I have 500,000 followers, or maybe I have 30,000 followers. The reality is that if I act in a way that is inauthentic or ingenuous, then I could lose those followers, and that would be very bad for me.
Yeah, I want to talk about that and bring in a question from one of our viewers on LinkedIn. Mark says, do you think all brands post-COVID-19 are at risk of all saying the same thing in similar ways? And I'm interested in your point of view because you're talking about these macro influencers who people, I would imagine, usually follow because they have a certain, not just aesthetic, but a certain point of view. And I imagine, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that, brands might want to have the umbrella of, safe hygiene messaging and positive messaging or whatnot, but they also come from a specific kind of point of view, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think what's really interesting about influencer is how, first of all, how it's matured very dramatically in the last 24 months. I think that's the first thing I would say. And I think the second thing that is really important to emphasize is that every single influencer or creator is a mini executive creator director in their world, so one of the benefits that advertisers and brands really do benefit from is that they can have multiple creative approaches that are at, which are at scale, and that can be regularly updated, because all of these mini creative directors are essentially taking briefs and then executing on them, and they're building very short and long form, but the very rapid turnaround and originality is, if you like, is their kind of signature tune. So what the brands have to, and the ones who are really successful at it, that they get the balance right between having something that remains authentic and very much the flavor of the influencer, but at the same time it embodies the brand architecture or the value proposition of that brand. And that's really the key trick. That's the key magic, if you like, that we find with the macro creators in particular.
Yeah, I want to get into the magic because I know you have some examples, but you mentioned that brands and creators have flexibility and that you're busier than ever, and that is because some funds from, let's say, out of home or experiential have been redirected to influencer marketing. So some of the trends that I've been seeing, and I think you've been seeing, are influencer marketing campaigns around the themes or the topics of fitness and food and any kind of like positive feel. What are you seeing and what are we seeing?
Well, I mean, we're definitely seeing, there's been a lot of talk, hasn't there, globally about the corporate social responsibility of global brands. And I think what we've really seen in this last few months is that coming to life, that becoming much more of a reality. At the end of the day, we still have to sell product, right? But I think the important thing is that if you have a message of added value where you can really connect with consumers and you can show them that they can remain safe, you're part of that whole remain safe messaging, and about being about family and connections and doing that in an authentic way, then I think brands who are doing that and winning are really, it's really exciting. And and interestingly enough, I think, I mean, you mentioned Cinco de Mayo. I mean, you know, we just did a big campaign. Unfortunately, I don't have any samples to give you, but I think you can work out who it was. You know, there's people still, you know, want to celebrate as well, and I think, you know, more than ever, in fact. And again, you know, back to the type of relationship that you have with an influencer as a member of their audience, as a, you know, their following. You know, they're not like your best friend or your sister or your brother, but they are kind of, they're much closer to you than, you know, a 48 sheet poster that's, you know, on the boulevard or wherever. It's, you know, it's much more personal, that connectivity. So I think that that's something else that in this horrible time that we are going through, the really, you know, the best influencers and the best creators have really stepped up to the mark there. They've really gone on, you know, they've really risen, they've raised the bar. And, you know, for that, it's been it's been a very touching experience. And I think also they've brought credibility to brand messaging, which, if you mentioned earlier about creativity, I mean, you know, I think we've all seen enough adverts now on television or commercials on TV, which have got, you know, the mobile phone screen on the screen, you know, delivering the messaging, and that in that format of on TV screen, it looks really, it kind of becomes a bit boring. But when you, because you're in a broadcast medium, but when you're on your mobile phone and you're engaged in a one-to-one, you know, closed, you know, you're in a closed network, an absolutely direct relationship with your mobile phone, it's a completely different experience. So I think that what's very clear is just how powerful mobile has become as the, you know, as the chosen means by which, you know, more and more of us, it's no longer simply a Generation Z or a millennial, it's all of us are mobile first, you know.
Yeah, I have been looking a lot at
Remarkable.
my phone, for a lot of wellness content, because that's what I'm interested in also, and influencers in that space. That's something that you've seen with the hashtag mindful movement.
Yes.
Can you walk us through some good examples of creativity and macro influencers stepping up?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think Nick's going to put on a slideshow. So these are two of our influencers, and I think the quotes are really powerful. I think the content creation side of the influencer industry is flourishing right now. My audience is shopping about 3 times more now than they were before. My likes and comments have tripled since lockdown, and my audience are more engaged than ever. And that's Petite Ellie. And that's absolutely verifiable by all her Insta data. So, you know, I think she has really seen much higher levels of engagement, and she's actually seeing that, you know, she's actually realizing, if you like, her power to encourage and to empower her audience. And then we've got Belle Marie, who says, since then, I've mainly recorded more podcasts and worked my way into platforms like Pinterest, which I didn't use before. I've also published more cooking content and sports. And I think, really interestingly enough, one of the things that we found very encouraging about our creators is that they are actually going on multi-platforms. So they're using this, you know, Insta, if that's their, you know, their first platform or the main one, and now using that for very different reasons to when they're on TikTok. So on TikTok, they might be more playful and more just focused on entertaining their audience. It's really interesting. They kind of are liberated, if that makes sense, and are exploring their creativity on these platforms much more openly.
Yeah, so Instagram is like really visual and fun too.
It is. It's absolutely fantastic. I love it. But I think it's interesting how the same influencers are doing very different things on the different platforms. I mean, it's still fun and they're still connecting with their audience. I mean, you've got some examples here now. I think we've got Hobbies Go Lucky, and then this is Chic My Styles, which I think, Nick, you're going to show us, aren't you?
Yep, let's do it.
Well, I think the great thing about Amy Kelly, who's a US-based influencer, she is an amazing creative, and she does all of this at home, and she creates all these props, and she builds out these, fun short-form content, which really goes down well. And I think, given that we're trying to encourage people to be reflective and about their mental health, this is these creators, I think, have done a really excellent job at kind of, again, keeping it light and connecting it with their audience, but still making it meaningful. And I think we've got one here as well from there's Victoria Winterford, and this is. I don't want to fall asleep. So that's Albertine, and Albertine there is just kind of, again, encouraging people to, take time out, maybe have a bit of a pamper for yourself, but do it, again, doing it in a very kind of connectable and authentic way.
Yes. I feel like if I were an influencer, I would be the self-care, masking all the time influencer, including the cloth masks. We have a good question from our LinkedIn audience. Do you think influencers can be extremely relevant to host virtual events for CPG brands that were previously allocating a majority of resources into experiential marketing? Any examples of a brand that did this right? I think this is a great question from Kyle, because I imagine maybe you could do like an Instagram live kind of virtual event, or maybe you have some other ideas or examples.
Absolutely. And we currently are working on at least 3 that will be going live in the next, literally next few weeks. So that's the answer is absolutely. And the amazing news is that the talent is available, which it's not normal. I mean, you've got a real mixture of talent. You've got the influencers who, the macro influencers, and you've also got the hero influencers, and also some what I would describe as more mainstream talent from maybe music and comedy and from the theatre and from film and television, who are coming together to really put together extremely exciting opportunities. And these are being backed by big CPG brands and organizations. One of the things that I think is really interesting is that, particularly, and this is a subject that's extremely important to me and I'm very passionate about, is the diversity. And again, going back to the corporate social responsibility values of brands, they are, I'm really, really delighted and encouraged to see brands are putting money behind events such as, focusing on the LGBTQ community, Bain getting the message across about, and really taking some kind of like proper meaningful connectivity, which again at this time seems really, really appropriate. And influencers are able to actually bring that to life. And IG Live is absolutely a fantastic platform, as is TikTok. I mean, TikTok, you can do a lot on TikTok. And we're seeing more and more clients now experimenting with TikTok in really exciting and dynamic and different ways. So that's really encouraging. It's not just those 2 platforms, but obviously, it's great to see big brands exploring and experimenting with these new formats and with these new ways in which they can communicate. But you're right. Live events in particular, we've seen some absolutely outstanding live events with amazing DJs, fantastic photography by a drone, etc. That's really exciting and hugely engaging, which I think is where we're now seeing and realizing the actual power of the audiences and the influencers.
Yeah, that's very cool as a way to kind of move forward from now. We only have about a minute or two left. Is there anything else you definitely want to show us or mention?
Yeah, I'd really like to just show the World Health Authority, the WHO campaign, 2 examples, which I think is on slide 3 of, which just basically shows how influencers can communicate with purpose. So maybe, Nick, if you don't mind playing just these 2 to end on. We've got Kitty Cowl.
Wash your hands, wash your hands, wash your hands. Wash your hands, wash your hands, wash your hands. I can't dab you up until you wash your hands.
And then we've also got Cesar Alberto. And I think these are 2 great examples of where we were targeting ethnic minorities and also diverse audiences with really important messaging around COVID-19. And they were great creatives. So
yeah, I love those. They got me like dancing in my seat, and it brings a point, and it also brings the personality. I love the diversity angle, of course, and it's good information rather than personal opinion, which can kind of go into the negative space of bad influencer marketing examples. Yeah, but I'm really looking forward to how the influencer marketing space continues to evolve, and I want to thank you, Mary, for your time and your insights.
Thank you very much, Co. And thank you, Nick, from behind the scenes doing all the technology. Really appreciate
thank you, Nick, so much. It's a team effort, and I hope you all stay safe out there.
Yes.
Continue to wash your hands, and we will be back here tomorrow for Adweek together. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Co. Bye-bye, everybody. Thank you very much.